In a quiet village nestled between golden fields and distant blue mountains lived a young man named Arjun. His days passed in a calm rhythm, like the soft wind that rustled through the wheat. To those who saw him walking through the village paths, offering gentle smiles and lending a helping hand, Arjun appeared content. He worked the land with quiet dedication, greeted neighbors with warmth, and never raised his voice in anger. The villagers admired his serenity, believing he had found some secret to peace. But within him, a storm had long been brewing. Arjun carried a weight far heavier than any bundle of wheat or basket of harvest. It was the weight of guilt, a quiet, invisible burden that clung to his chest like a shadow at noon. Years ago, Arjun had dared to dream. With a heart full of hope, he opened a small shop, believing that honesty and kindness would be enough to build something lasting. He trusted people he called friends, invested all he had, and gave his soul to that dream. But life, as it sometimes does, did not return his kindness. The ones he trusted betrayed him. Promises broke like fragile twigs, and his efforts crumbled like sand slipping through his fingers. The shop closed, the debts remained, and worse than the loss of money was the quiet voice inside him that whispered, "You failed." That voice became his constant companion. Though the seasons changed, Arjun's heart remained in a winter that never thawed. He walked among the blooming flowers and the smiling villagers, but his eyes held a distant sadness, a gaze always turned slightly inward. He could laugh, but never fully. He could rest, but never deeply. Each morning, as sunlight touched the rooftops and birds called out the day's beginning, Arjun awoke with a dull ache in his chest, a silent echo from a past he couldn't let go. No one knew. No one asked. He didn't show it, because pain often wears a well-trained mask. But in the stillness of the night, as the world hushed and even the stars blinked quietly above, Arjun would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision, every word, every misstep. Why didn't I see the signs? Why did I trust so easily? And so, even in this beautiful village where the air smelled of earth and peace, Arjun's heart was heavy, his soul tired, and his hope quietly flickering like a candle nearing its end. Though the village was wrapped in the gentle rhythm of life, children laughing in the distance, elders sipping warm tea by shaded porches, oxen pulling carts through golden fields, inside Arjun, winter never left. It was not the kind of winter one feels on the skin, but the kind that lingers in the heart. A stillness, a chill, a weight that slows the spirit. Outwardly, he moved like any other man. He watered his crops, fixed the tools, joined in festivals when expected. But inwardly, Arjun was frozen in time, trapped in the moment everything fell apart. Each morning he rose with the sun, but instead of greeting the day with joy, he carried the same old ache, like a stone under his ribs. Even when the breeze was warm and the sky a soft canvas of light, he felt distant, as if the world around him were just a story he no longer belonged to. He would smile at neighbors, yet a part of him wondered if they remembered his failure. He'd sit at the temple, listening to chants, but his heart remained untouched, unreachable, guarded by the quiet sorrow he had nurtured for years. The guilt whispered constantly, not loud, not sharp, but steady. You were foolish. You should have known better. You let everyone down. It followed him like a shadow, not angry, just persistent. And that persistence was enough to make even the brightest day feel gray. People saw a calm man. But Arjun knew the truth. His calm was not peace, it was resignation. He had stopped expecting change. He no longer allowed himself to hope, because hoping meant risking again. And he feared disappointment more than pain. Sometimes, a kind word from a friend or the scent of jasmine in the evening air would stir something in him, memories of who he used to be, dreams he once held. But the moment would pass, and the cold returned. He had trained himself not to follow those flickers. It's too late, he would think. I missed my chance. But the soul is a quiet student. Even when we think it is asleep, it listens, it watches, it waits. And somewhere beneath Arjun's hardened silence, a soft voice was beginning to stir. Not loud, not yet, but present. A voice that gently asked, "What if this isn't the end?" A voice he hadn't heard in a long time. One that sounded almost like his own, but from a time when he still believed in light. That afternoon, as clouds wandered lazily across the pale sky and the village dipped into a familiar quiet, Arjun noticed an unfamiliar figure walking through the main path. It was an old monk, his robes simple, sun-worn, and the wooden staff in his hand, tapping rhythmically against the earth. He walked neither fast nor slow, but with a kind of timeless grace, as if he were listening to the world breathe with each step. Arjun stood still, observing from the shade of a neem tree. There was nothing loud or grand about this man, and yet something about his presence stirred the still waters of Arjun's heart. He had heard of this monk before, Master Tenzin, the quiet one who lived far up in the hills where the clouds touched the earth. Some said he never spoke unless it was truly needed. Others believed he could read the burdens in a person's eyes before they even said a word. Most villagers kept a respectful distance, but Arjun, he felt something else. A pull, a faint curiosity laced with something deeper, perhaps longing. A longing to be seen not as he appeared, but as he truly was. Arjun followed the monk at a distance, not daring to interrupt. Tenzin paused now and then to observe the trees, to touch the bark, to smile at the children playing barefoot in the dust. Each action seemed deliberate, like a prayer written through motion. And then, as if he had known all along he was being followed, the monk stopped, turned slightly, and without looking directly at Arjun, said in a voice barely above a whisper, "You have been walking with a heavy wind at your back." Arjun froze. His chest tightened. He hadn't spoken a word, and yet those words felt as if they came straight from the center of his burden. He wanted to answer, but the words caught in his throat. All he managed was a quiet nod. "Come," the monk said simply, gesturing toward the edge of the village where the fields met the forest path. "When the soil is too dry, the seed cannot grow, but when it is broken open by rain, that is when life begins." Arjun hesitated. He had never followed anyone like this before. He had always been the one who stayed behind, who watched others go, who listened to advice but rarely acted. And yet, there was something in the monk's tone, firm but kind, gentle yet immovable. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a door silently opening. With a breath deeper than usual, Arjun stepped forward. He didn't know exactly why, he didn't know exactly where, but for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside, a tiny flame that refused to be smothered, a spark of hope, small, flickering, but alive. The path to the hills was steep, quiet, and filled with the murmurs of wind brushing through the grass. Arjun followed Master Tenzin in silence, the trees growing denser with every step. Though the monk didn't speak much, his presence seemed to whisper what words could not. At one point, they reached a clearing where an old canvas sack lay beside a large rock. Without turning, Tenzin gestured to it and said calmly, "Carry this to the top." Arjun looked at the sack. It was worn, frayed at the edges, and when he lifted it, much heavier than it looked. Stones! It was filled with stones of all shapes and sizes, pressing down against his shoulders as he hoisted it onto his back. "Why this?" he asked, breath already short. "What does this prove?" Tenzin simply began walking ahead. So Arjun followed, grumbling at first, the weight digging into his spine. Every step felt like dragging not just rocks, but regrets, doubts, memories. With every rise in the path, he thought of his past mistakes, his failed shop, the friends who betrayed him, the hopes he had once planted and watched wither. Each stone in the sack began to feel like a name, a face, a moment of shame, and he began to understand. At one steep bend in the trail, Arjun's legs trembled and he collapsed to his knees. The sack thudded to the ground. "I can't carry this anymore," he gasped. Tenzin, who had paused just ahead, walked back and sat beside him. He picked up a small stone from the path and placed it gently in the sack. "Did you feel that?" he asked. Arjun nodded. "Yes, it's heavier now." The monk nodded slowly, his voice soft but unwavering. "Each time you say to yourself, 'I should have known better,' or 'I was too foolish,' or 'I failed,' it is like adding one more stone. This sack is your past, your grief, your guilt, and each day you've been carrying it, even when you thought your hands were empty." Arjun looked at the ground, heart pounding not from exertion, but from the truth in those words. "And what am I supposed to do?" he asked. "Just let it go?" Tenzin pointed to the summit visible above the treetops. "When we reach the top, you will decide whether to carry it down again or leave it behind. The choice will be yours." Arjun closed his eyes, The wind swept gently over them. It no longer felt like just a wind. It felt like a question. A test. Could he really let go? Without another word, he picked up the sack. It was just as heavy. But now, somehow, it felt different. It was no longer just a burden. It was a mirror. As they reached a resting point near the summit, the wind gentled and the trees parted to reveal a wide, flat stone, smooth and warm under the late morning sun. Arjun dropped the sack beside him, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. The burden he carried had begun to shift something within him, not just his muscles, but something far older, deeper, long buried beneath years of silent sorrow. Master Tenzin sat beside him, gazing at the horizon where the hills rolled like waves into the distance. He didn't speak immediately. He just breathed, slowly, as if even the silence had its own teachings. Then, in a tone both calm and firm, he began a story. Long ago, he said, two monks were traveling together, walking a dirt path after a heavy rain. The road was muddy, the river swollen. As they came upon a village edge, they saw a young woman standing by a fast-moving stream, unable to cross. Her robes were fine, her feet delicate. She was afraid. Arjun listened, wiping sweat from his brow. One of the monks stepped forward, without hesitation, and lifted the woman into his arms. He carried her across the stream, set her down, and continued walking, without a word. The other monk followed, but he was troubled. Hours passed, and finally he said, "Brother, we monks are not supposed to touch women. Why did you carry her?" The first monk smiled gently and replied, "I set her down at the river's edge hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" Arjun blinked, the parable washing over him like cool water. Tenzin turned to him and spoke, his voice like a bell struck in a quiet room. "So many of us, Arjun, carry things long after we've set them down physically. A word someone said years ago, a decision we regret, a moment we failed. Our bodies may move forward, but our hearts remain at that river, holding what we no longer need to carry." A soft breeze passed, rustling the nearby trees. It seemed to echo the lesson, reminding him that nature lets go so gracefully. Leaves fall without protest, water flows without resistance. "I understand," Arjun said at last, eyes lowered. "But sometimes, it feels like if I let go, I'll forget who I was." Tenzin smiled, almost sadly. "Letting go is not forgetting, my son. It's remembering who you truly are, without the weight." There was peace in that thought, a gentle kind of clarity. And as the wind swept across the hill, Arjun felt something inside him begin to loosen, like the knot in his chest was slowly untying itself. As the wind softened around them and the warmth of the hill embraced their silence, Master Tenzin stood up slowly, his robes flowing gently like river silk in the morning breeze. He looked to a small stream winding its way down from the rocks, a quiet, clear ribbon of water humming a song older than memory. Without a word, he motioned for Arjun to follow. They walked in silence, the kind of silence that speaks. The kind that teaches not with words but with presence. When they reached the stream's edge, the master bent down and picked up a single dry leaf that had fallen nearby. Its edges were curled, its veins delicate, yet it carried a quiet dignity, like a soul that had traveled far. Holding the leaf in the palm of his hand, Tenzin spoke. "This leaf once danced with the wind, clung to the branch, and soaked in the sun. It did its part, and now it rests." He paused, allowing the stillness to sink in. "Watch what happens when we let it go." He knelt by the stream and gently placed the leaf upon the flowing water. Arjun's eyes followed it, floating gently at first, then twirling, drifting, surrendering to the rhythm of the current. The stream accepted it without resistance. The leaf didn't fight, it simply went. "You see," the master said softly, "the stream does not demand the leaf to be anything other than what it is. And the leaf, in turn, does not cling to the past, nor resist the present. It flows." Arjun's heart thudded. He didn't yet speak, but something inside him began to mirror that leaf. He looked down at his own hands, the same hands that had once held dreams, then regret, then fear. Now they trembled, not with weakness, but with the beginning of release. Tenzin turned to him. "Take your time. When you're ready, choose a leaf of your own." Slowly, Arjun reached toward the ground. He picked a small leaf, still carrying a trace of green, like hope that never fully died. He held it close, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of memories press against his chest. Then he thought of the betrayals, the failures, the harsh words he had spoken to himself for years. Closing his eyes, he whispered, not to Tenzin, not to the stream, but to life itself, "I'm ready." He placed the leaf on the surface of the water. It floated forward, just as the first one had. Gentle, free. And as Arjun watched it disappear around a bend in the rocks, a lightness rose within him. Not sudden, not loud, but steady, as if his heart, after so long, had finally exhaled. Tenzin said no more. He simply smiled, eyes full of warmth, like a grandfather watching a child take his first real breath. And in that moment, Arjun didn't just understand the lesson. He lived it. Arjun remained seated by the stream long after the leaf had disappeared from view. The silence was no longer heavy. It felt spacious, like an open sky. Inside him, something gentle had begun to stir. Not an explosion of emotion, but a quiet shift, like the sun rising unnoticed behind the mountains, slowly filling the valleys with light. For the first time in many years, he wasn't lost in thought. He wasn't battling his past. He was simply here, breathing, listening, present. Master Tenzin stood beside him but said nothing. His presence alone was enough. He knew this moment was sacred, the kind of moment when the soul, weary from dragging years of self-blame, begins to stand up on its own feet, not to fight the world, but to walk through it with clarity. Arjun looked at his hands again. They no longer trembled. He stretched them out and watched them in the light. These same hands that had built dreams, that had failed, that had fallen. And now, somehow, these were the same hands that could begin again. The monk finally spoke. Transformation does not begin with force. It begins with permission. The permission to be imperfect, to be human, to let go. Arjun looked up. His eyes met Tenzin's. "Is it really that simple?" he asked. Tenzin nodded, slowly. "Simple, yes. Easy? No. You will still face fear, doubt, and memory. But now, you know a secret. You are not those things. You are the one who observes them. And in that knowing, you are already free." The words sank deep, not as instructions, but as seeds. Arjun did not feel like a different person, and yet, he could feel something new growing inside. A root of peace, a sprout of trust, a tenderness toward himself that he hadn't known he needed. The wind picked up again, gentle and cool, brushing past his face like a friend. The stream kept flowing, as if to say, "Yes, let's keep going." Arjun rose to his feet. He didn't feel lighter because the world had changed. He felt lighter because he no longer needed to carry all of it alone. They began to walk back down the trail. Each step was the same as before, and yet each one felt like a beginning. Arjun started to notice the colors of the leaves, the shape of the clouds, the rhythm of the earth beneath his feet. Life, it seemed, had always been this alive. He had simply been too burdened to see it. Tenzin did not speak again, but his smile remained, like a lantern carried silently beside Arjun, lighting the way not with answers, but with presence. And so, the transformation began. Not with fireworks, but with forgiveness. When Arjun descended from the hill in the days that followed, the village had not changed, but something within him undeniably had. The narrow streets still curved between the same houses. The morning mist still hovered gently over the golden fields, and the villagers still greeted him with familiar smiles. But this time, Arjun met their eyes not with heaviness, but with clarity. He was no longer avoiding the past. He was walking alongside it, but no longer under its shadow. Each step he took felt lighter, not because the world was softer, but because his heart had made peace with its own weight. He passed by the ruins of his old shop, once a symbol of failure, now simply a page in the story. For the first time, he stood before it without flinching. The brokenness was still there, but the pain had softened. In place of bitterness, there was understanding. In place of shame, there was quiet strength. Arjun didn't rush to rebuild or fix what had been lost. Instead, he took time to be present. He listened to the laughter of children without feeling excluded. He sat by the well and spoke with elders, not to hide his wounds but to learn from theirs. He helped mend a neighbor's fence. He shared stories without needing to appear strong. And in these small moments, something beautiful unfolded. His heart opened to life again, like a flower blooming after years of drought. The villagers noticed. They didn't say much, but they watched. They felt the calm that surrounded him. Some approached him with their own quiet burdens, fears, regrets, doubts they had buried deep. Arjun didn't offer solutions. He offered space, presence, a listening ear. And in doing so, he became a mirror in which others could see their own healing begin. One morning, inspired by a quiet confidence that had been slowly taking root, Arjun opened a small new store, not to chase success, but to create with love. Inside, he sold simple handmade items, woven baskets, carved wood, herbal teas. But each item held a deeper story. They weren't just goods. They were offerings, born from stillness and growth. People came not only to buy, but to breathe, to rest, to be. Arjun began to speak gently of what he had learned, not as a teacher, but as someone who had walked through his own night and found the moon still shining. He didn't pretend the pain had disappeared. He only shared how he had stopped wrestling with it and instead learned to walk beside it with compassion. A young boy once asked him, "Do you still feel sad sometimes?" Arjun smiled and nodded. "Yes, I do. But sadness is not the enemy. It is a reminder that we cared. It's the rain that softens the soil where joy can grow." And so, Arjun lived, not in perfection but in peace. His days were quiet, but full. His heart still remembered the past, but no longer clung to it. He had discovered what it meant to see the world with new eyes, not eyes that avoided suffering, but eyes that had learned to see beauty through it. And in that seeing, his life was no longer a story of loss, it was a story of return, a return to himself. One late afternoon, as the golden sun dipped behind the hills and painted the village in warm, gentle hues, Arjun sat quietly outside his humble little shop. The breeze was soft, and the sounds of the day were fading into the calm of approaching evening. He was sipping a cup of warm tea, not rushing anywhere, not trying to fix anything, just being. A small boy, no more than 8 or 9, wandered up to him. His eyes were wide with that innocent curiosity that children carry so freely. He looked at Arjun for a long moment, then sat down beside him without a word. For a while they simply listened to the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of crickets. Then, with a sincerity that pierced the stillness like a bell, the child asked, "Did you ever make a mistake?" The question hung in the air, simple and disarming. Arjun smiled, gently turning the teacup in his hands. "Many," he said softly. "Some small, some big. Some I thought I would never recover from." The boy tilted his head. "Do they still hurt?" Arjun took a breath, his eyes following a leaf dancing in the wind. "Sometimes, yes," he replied, "but not in the same way. They're no longer wounds, more like old scars. I don't try to hide them anymore. I've learned to carry them with kindness." The boy was quiet for a moment, as if weighing this new idea. Then he asked, "How did you stop feeling bad about them?" Arjun looked down and offered a gentle smile. "I didn't stop feeling, I just stopped fighting the feeling. Guilt is heavy when we resist it. But when we sit with it, listen to it, and understand it, it softens, like ice melting in the morning sun." The child nodded, though he may not have understood it all. Still, something in Arjun's calm voice, in his presence, made the truth feel simple and comforting. "You see," Arjun continued, "mistakes are not the end of our story. They are part of how we learn to be real. And the truth is, what matters most is not what we did wrong, but what we choose to do next. If we grow kinder, gentler, more patient, then even the mistakes have served a purpose." The boy turned to him with wide eyes. "So it's okay to mess up?" Arjun chuckled softly, the sound like wind through chimes. "Yes, it is. It's human. What's not okay is to stop believing in yourself because of it. Every tree sheds its leaves, every river faces rocks. But they keep flowing, keep reaching, keep becoming." The child smiled, as if a great weight had been lifted from his small heart. He stood up, brushed the dust from his knees, and said with quiet confidence, "Thank you." Arjun watched him walk away, a little taller than before, and in that moment he realized, sometimes the deepest truths come in the simplest questions. Sometimes wisdom is not a lecture, but a conversation on a quiet evening, when hearts are open and time slows down. He finished his tea, the warmth lingering not just in his hands, but in his chest. A child's question had become a mirror, And once again, Arjun remembered that the truth he needed to live by was always simple. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to grow. As the golden afternoon light began to soften into evening, Arjun sat quietly outside his shop, watching the shadows stretch gently across the dusty village path. The day was coming to its peaceful close. There was no rush anymore, no urgency, just the stillness of a man who had made peace with his past and now rested in the present. From around the corner came the sound of small footsteps, quick and curious. A young boy, no older than 7 or 8, approached him with the quiet wonder that only children possess. His eyes, wide and sincere, studied Arjun as if trying to solve a mystery. Then, after a brief silence, the boy tilted his head and asked, "Mr. Arjun, have you ever made a mistake?" Arjun smiled gently, the kind of smile that comes from having walked through fire and returned with softened eyes. He nodded slowly. "Many," he said. "More than I can count." The boy sat cross-legged at Arjun's feet, his hands resting on his knees. "Did it make you sad?" Arjun let out a soft breath, looking out toward the horizon where the sky turned orange and pink. "Yes," he replied. "It did. For a long time. I used to carry that sadness like a sack of stones on my back. I thought if I just punished myself long enough, maybe I would become a better person." The boy frowned. "But did it work?" Arjun chuckled. A kind and quiet sound. "No, sadness only taught me how to feel small. It wasn't until I forgave myself that I began to grow." The boy's brow furrowed in confusion. "Forgive yourself? How do you do that?" Arjun turned to face the child fully, speaking with the calmness of a monk and the gentleness of a grandfather. "By realizing that we're all learning. Every mistake is like a lesson that came dressed as pain. When we understand the lesson, we no longer need to carry the pain." The child blinked. "So it's okay to mess up?" "Oh yes," Arjun said warmly. "Falling down is not failure. Staying down is. When you fall and you stand back up, wiser, humbler, and more compassionate, that is success." There was a long, thoughtful pause. Then the boy asked, "Do you still remember your mistakes?" Arjun looked up at the sky, where the first stars had begun to appear. "I remember them," he said softly, "but not to feel bad about them. I remember them the way you remember a storm that once passed over your home. It was loud, it was dark, but it brought the rain that made everything grow." The boy smiled as if something had clicked in his little heart. "I think I made a mistake yesterday," he confessed, "and I've been scared to tell anyone." Arjun leaned in, his voice low and full of care. "Thank you for being brave enough to say that. You see, talking about our mistakes, like you just did, is one of the first ways we begin to let go of them." The boy stood up, a bit taller now. "I'm gonna go tell my father. Maybe he won't be mad if I tell the truth." Arjun gave a small nod. "And even if he is, your honesty will plant something good between you. Give it time. Good things grow slowly." The boy ran off, leaving behind a trail of hope in the fading light. Arjun remained still, watching him disappear into the evening. And in his heart, he felt a quiet gratitude for the question of a child, and the reminder that even the heaviest truths can be made light when shared with love. And so we learn, wisdom does not always come wrapped in scripture or ritual. Sometimes it walks on small feet, speaks with a soft voice, and asks the most innocent questions.